Welcome to Friday Nights with Emma. How was everybody? Hope everybody's had a good week. As usual, give me a little thumbs up and a heart just to make sure that everybody's there. If I disappear, which it hasn't happened the last few weeks, so he's listening to me downstairs. Yeah, just refresh and I'll come back. But touch wood, and cross fingers, it's all been going fine. So, hi Sharon. So tonight, before I go on about what we're doing tonight, sorry, I'm going to waffle on a little bit about some exciting news. So, well, yeah, it's mixed. It's good. So for those of you who do live in the Peterborough area, Stamford, Deeping, all of that, the Swift Quilting, the shop itself in Tallington, is going to close at the end of March. So at the moment it's open Saturdays and Sundays, and so it'll be open every weekend now until the end of March. And then it's still going to be, all the fabric's still going to be available online as usual, but I'm going to start doing workshops at Sacrawell Farm, which, if you don't know it, it's like a little farming, like a live farming museum kind of, just off the A1, super easy to get to, lots of parking, nice cafe. So I'm going to start doing workshops there once a month. I've got some dates. Let me grab them. It's not going to be, I tried to get the same Saturday, but then when we thought about it, we're like, hi Dawn, hi Terry, hi Kathleen, hi Anne, hi Pam. When we thought about it, if we do the same Saturday, a lot of people have commitments on the same Saturday of the month. So we're mixing it up. So I'm going to be at Sacrawell for workshops on Saturday, the 25th of March. That'll be the first one. Oh, hi Anne, hi Pam. Saturday, May 16th. Saturday, June 20th. And Saturday, July 18th. That's what we've got booked in for now. And so it'll be from 10 to 4. And, hi Maggie, hi Irene. Everybody's joining. Hi Belinda. It'll be from 10 to 4, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. So there'll be two options. One will be an all-day sit and sew. So it's just £15 for all-day sit and sew. You can come and bring your own project, or bring a pattern, bring a work in progress, or something that you're stuck on, and I will be there to help you. So I will be there to guide you. So it won't be like a completely, you just got to do your own thing and sit and sew. I will be there. If you've got any questions, if you need any help, I will be there. The other option will be, there will be set workshops. Probably to start with, there'll be a morning workshop and an afternoon workshop. I think the first one, I've still got to work it all out, but I think the first one is going to be, sorry, hand piecing. So I might just do a morning and afternoon session of that. The other thing I've got in the works are lampshades. We're going to do lampshade workshops at some point. We might do some fabric printing, landscapes. Yeah, there'll be lots. So it'll be on my website, it'll be on Facebook. There will be on the Sacrawell Farm website as well. You'll be able to see through there. And then you just book them up through the swiftquilting.com website. You'll be able to buy your workshop and sign up for it for whatever day you want. So that's the news. Also, hi Maggie, hi Brenda, hi Sandra, hi Jackie. I'm sure I've missed some people. Hopefully I haven't. Oh, Beverly. Now you're jumping. March 24th, so this month, March 24th, I'll be with John Scott on John Scott's Sewing World. So I'll be back with John, so that'll be exciting. So that's all the news for now. That's all we got. So hi Lorraine. So now that all the waffling has been done, binding. Let's go to binding. So there's a few schools of thought on binding. Now there's the straight binding, which is what a lot of people do, which is when you cut your strips straight across the width of fabric. So I've got a strip here, I've got my selvages, so I've just cut this strip width of fabric straight binding. This tends to be the easiest one to do. Oh, hi Maria, hi Sue. Also the most cost effective because, oh, hi Tina. Straight binding, you need less fabric to get your strips from, basically. You don't have a lot extra, so you can work out exactly what you need to go around your quilt. So there's that. The downside of straight binding is so that you're gonna have your binding on like this, and so the grain is going across and down, basically. So if you put this on a quilt that you're going to use a lot and you're going to wash a lot, so for instance like a baby quilt, and I know Kaylee's baby quilt it's basically, oh, it's completely solid, it's nothing falling apart on it, but it is very much used and very loved, and it's been washed to death. So that one has bias binding on it. What you find on a lot of the old quilts is your bias can give way at the edges. So if you think of your threads that are in your fabric, you've got the long ones going down this way and then the short ones going across. There's lots of them going across on your bias, on your straight binding, but there's only 1 or 2 threads going long ways. So if that long ways thread gives way, if one of them gives way, that whole strip is kind of compromised. Oh, hi Julie. I like live a little shy, that's why I'm waiting your name. Oh, Romper Room. My cousin was on that apparently, much older cousin. I don't remember Romper Room, but yeah. So yes, straight binding. Basically, you've only got a few threads going all the way down on the edge of your quilt. So if those give way, if those wear out, you're going to have a hole. And you're going to have a hole, it's going to be compromised the whole length, basically. Bias binding, on the other hand, which I always used to do, I've just well, within the last 2 or 3 years, I'd say, gone to straight binding. This is bias binding. Now, I think if you're interested, next week I will do a tutorial on how to do bias binding. It's not as scary as anybody thinks. It's quite easy. Oh, hi Becky. It does take a little bit. You do have to be careful. You definitely have to use a walking foot when you put this on. So if I show you, this is cut across the grain, across the bias. So my threads are basically running this way and that way. So they're crisscrossing all the way across, basically. It's a little bit stretchier. Really good for if you have a quilt that has fancy shapes around the edge. So if it's scalloped, these will go around those curved edges really nicely. And it ends up being more durable because of the way that the grain is going. If you have one thread compromised, it's not that long. It's basically, so the grain goes from here to here and from here to here. So if one of my threads goes out, it's not the end of the world because there's so many more that are there to keep the stability, basically. Oh, hi Shirley, hi Joan. So that's bias binding. So personally, if I had the time, I would do bias binding for all of my quilts. Quilts that I'm going to use and go on the bed and get washed and be thrown about and abused, but used. I would always do bias binding because it's the most durable. You won't have to worry about replacing it or anything like that. Now for wall hangings or cushions, which is what I'm doing at the minute, straight grain binding is fine. It's quick, it's easy, it's cheaper because you do have to have a certain size. Well, I tend to go, I'll show you next week, but I tend to go for the biggest size square. So you make this out of one big square and I try to go for the biggest one. So it would be about 40 inches or 42 inches square, depending on how wide your fabric is. So that's bias binding. Straight binding, which is what I'm going to show you. There's a few different ways again. Oh, hi Erica. There's not It's technically not a right way or wrong way, because you know me, there's no right or wrong way, only the way that works for you. Oh, hi Sue. Oh, I made some the other night. I'm guessing bias binding for the first time for a small project. I only needed 2 strips from a fat quarter, so I didn't need to join. Oh, binding. Okay, yes. Well, I tend to join them all the way around. So there's 2 ways. You can do it straight. So as per like a regular seam, just join them up straight. If you do that, what you'll find is when you seam that and you press it open, I tend to press them open if I do that, you're going to have quite a bit of bulk when you fold it all over and you fold it over again. So, oh, hi Alison. Hi Beverly. The other thing I tend to do is I always do 3-inch strips. I know a lot of people go for 2.5 inches, but I find that's, when I go to fold my binding over, I find that's a little bit too scant for me. I like a nice generous binding, so I'm not having to like eke it over and try and sew it down. So I always go 3 inches. And to join the strips, what I do, oh, hi Joy, is I put them at an angle to each other, like this. Now you have to be careful when you are doing that. I've only got 2 strips to put together tonight, so you don't have to worry about it. But if you do that, make sure that when you go to put on your next one, that it's put the same way, so you don't end up with a seam on one side of your binding and then a seam on the other side because you didn't, you joined them up. I've done that before, so I'm talking from experience. Make sure that your seams are on the same side. So like I said, I put it at an angle. I'm going to pin this, and if you want to be super accurate, what you can do, have I got a pencil? I think I do have a pencil. Oh, I do have my pencil and have my little ruler even handy. So you're going to sew from corner to corner. Oh, hi Sonia. So I'm going to draw a line from corner to corner so that I've got something to, as a guide, something to sew along. I have a pencil, but it doesn't seem to be marking very well. There. Okay, so that's what I mean from corner to corner. So you're going from the corner here to the corner of the binding that's underneath. So you're going to go straight like that. Stitch length 2.5. Hold my threads. Okay, let me angle you over so you can see what I'm doing. Ah! Helps if I don't drop the phone off the holder. Sorry, yeah, not being very professional tonight. Sorry guys and gals. Okay, everybody's there. All right, so you can see kind of what I'm doing. There we go. Yeah. There you go. So you can see I've just sewn that straight across like that. And then I'm just going to take my pin out before I cut it. And then I just cut it about 1/4 inch seam allowance. And then press it over to one side, just like that. Okay. Right. I'm going to leave the camera like that so you can see what I'm doing. I always, so with bias binding as well as straight binding, if you buy bias binding pre-made, what you'll find is, if I can show you, yeah, I can see you there, they will already be pressed over like this. So they fold it over on either side, can you see? And then fold it over again. So that's what bought bias binding tends to be like. Now when you do that, you've only got one layer of fabric that's on the outer edge. I think that's a bit of a waste. So what I do, and you'll end up with exactly the same sort of dimensions, I always fold my binding over. It's a lot easier to put it on as well this way. So it's doubled, and then I sew it on like that. So I've got a cushion cover that I've finished up. Pull you guys back again so I can see you. Make sure there's no comment. Oh, hi Susan. Hi Sue. Hi Lorraine. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thanks for saying I'm doing a good job. All right, so I've got my cushion cover. This was just a Quilt As You Go cushion top, and I've added the back to it already. So I've just added a envelope back. I've just hemmed up my edges. Oh, I've just found another pin. What I've done on this, if you can see, I've just basted on the backing to the front all the way around, just to keep that backing in place. Now, depending on how, I'll move it back so I can see you guys. Depending on how you want to finish it, will depend on which side you ought to sew your binding to. So on a quilt, if you want to, or anything actually, if you want to, oh hi mum, if you want to hand finish it, the best way to sew it on is onto the front, and then what you'll do is you'll flip it over and then you'll hand sew it down on the back. So that's what I'm going to do with this one. Firstly, because I've got a join, I'm going to lay my piece down. So I'm just laying my binding along my cushion to see where that join is going to be. Because I don't want that join to end up on a corner, because it's going to be a pain if I do. So I'm going to pin that in place so that stays there. So I've put my join right here, and if you see where my join is, because I did it at an angle, it's angled, so there's not a seam going straight up and down your fabric, so that bulk is spread out basically from here to about here. So that bulky seam is spread out a little bit. If you want it even more spread out, you can press it open. So that's that. That's that bit. Now if I was doing this on the quilt, where I tend to start, so I would make sure I would still lay out my binding all the way around to make sure that I don't have any joins on a corner, and then I would start the binding, although the way I'm going to show you to finish it, it doesn't really matter, but I would start it, if this is the top, I would start joining it in sort of the bottom left hand corner-ish, away from the corner, but in an area sort of down here. Now the reason I do that on a quilt is that tends to be an area where your eye isn't drawn to first off, so you don't tend to look immediately at the corner on the left or on the right or the bottom first off. You tend to look in the middle or at the top. So that's why I always put it here, so if just in case I've got, you know, a not very nice join or something, I don't want it to distract from anywhere nice on the quilt. I always put it somewhere where your eye isn't going to get drawn to first, so you can kind of hide it. That's one of the tricks. So I've laid out my binding. Let's see how this works. Oh no! Oh no! Oh no! I'm going to be short. Okay, I'm going to be short on this, so we're going to do a little bit of pretending. Sorry. So let me still leave that there. So I'm going to start right here. I'm going to start right here. I'm going to show you how to do the corner. So I'm going to sew it to the front with the idea that I'm going to hand finish it. When I'm sewing it down, I give it about 1/2 inch seam allowance, So that tends to be either on the outer edge of my walking foot or just slightly inside. It depends on what your walking foot looks like. So if I move you over, hopefully I can angle you up and so you can see. So my walking foot actually has a couple of gaps in it. So you can see. That's my pin. Angle this in. There. So you might be able to see, maybe not. So in my walking foot, there's two little holes on either side. So right here where I'm poking, and right here, there's actually a gap so I can see through it. So sometimes I use, it's a little rectangular gap as well. So sometimes I use either one of the edges inside my walking foot as my guide to keep along the edge. So if I want it to be a little bit smaller seam allowance, then I'll use one of those inner holes in my walking foot. Using a walking foot, because there's so many layers all the way through, it does really help. I did actually put some binding on, or I actually did some, no, it wasn't even binding, it was a basting. I did some of the basting with just my regular foot, and it was pushing up, it was bunching up the fabric. So even if you're just basting, if you've got several layers like this is, you definitely need a walking foot. So I'm just going to give it a little lock stitch first, and I'm going to increase my stitch length to 3. Always sew, if you've got the option, always sew with your needle position ending in the down position. That just helps to make sure that everything stays in place while you're not sewing, basically. So I'm going to sew almost but not quite to the end. The goal is to leave about a seam allowance worth of space between the edge of whatever your quilt, or your, in this case, my cushion top, and where my stitching stops. So I'm just feeling underneath for where that edge is, and I'm just going to gauge it there. I think that's good. Now, instead of a lock stitch here, I tend to do a little backward stitching. And then lift your needle up. Right, so that's what it looks like. That's the gap underneath. Can you? Yep, you can see. So that's about right. And then what we do is you fold it first this way and then back on itself. So folding it this way and then back on itself. And you want it, when you fold it back, you want this bias, this binding edge, to be exactly up against your quilt right here. Now if you've stitched a little bit too much, it's okay. What you can do is, because if you back stitch it like this, what you can do is just go in and pick out a stitch or two, depending on how much you need, and then try it again. If you haven't stitched quite enough, that's actually a little bit easier, because you just want to make sure, if I haven't stitched it enough, what will happen is I'll be able to peel it back. So if I pull it back as far as it will go against that stitching, you can see I haven't quite stitched it as much as I need to, because when I fold it over to that much, there's a little bit of a gap. So I'm just going to redo it just to make sure that this corner, so what I'm doing is, when I fold it, I'm gauging that this corner fold is right in this corner, and that my edge of my binding is right against the edge of this quilt. And then folding it back. Now, I'm just readjusting to make sure everything is squared up. So this corner is square. What you want to have on this side is about a 16th, can't really see it, 16th inch gap between your fold and the edge. So you should be able to see about a 16th of an inch worth of your binding raw edge on this side. I'll stitch it down and then I'll show you what I mean. So I always do a little bit of back stitching here as well. I'm just going to do a lock stitch there, and I'm going to show you that corner now. So that's what it looks like. You can see there's a little bit of a tiny bit of a gap right there. You don't want it going over the edge. If you have too much binding in that corner, when you go to fold it over, so this is my front, you can see it should go nicely. So you have a nice folded edge on that corner and a nice folded edge. You can trim them. Sometimes the corners get a bit bulky, so I tend to just snip them off. And you can fuss with it until it actually sits the way you want it to. So it's got a nice folded corner on that side, and a nice, well, it would be if I was actually pinning it down, folded corner on this side. Right, and then you continue doing all the corners that look like that. So when you get to the end, we're going to pretend that we've done all that. Let me come back to you, see if there's any questions as well, because I couldn't see it. Hi guys. Oh, hi Alison. Oh, good, I'm glad you're liking it. Yes, so do all the corners like that, and then when you get to this end right here, normally, actually I'm going to unpick it a little tiny bit quickly, because on a cushion it's probably easier if you have this gap in the middle. On a quilt you'll want it about at least 4 inches, or no, 6 inches away from the edge, from the corner I mean. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to cheat a little bit, and I'm going to pretend that I've got to this corner, and I'm going to sew this corner, and then I'm going to show you the join. And then later on tonight I'm going to pick it all and I'm going to fix it. Make sure there's enough. There we go. Okay. Down. Okay, I'm going to show. Oh, hi Pam. Love the fact you show us the corners, including doing it wrong. Most tutorials can do too quick, and I don't show how to correct them. Cool, good. I'll show you this one again. I'll show you some more on another one as well that I'm going to do on the machine. So make sure you can see. Okay, good. So I'm going to show that corner again. So this is where I am. That's where my, can you see? That's where my edge is. So that is where I put that edge right there. That's where the edge of my quilt is. So I'm probably going to want to aim to stop about there. About there. Can't see that dot. Yeah, about right there is where I'm going to stop. One more stitch. Go backwards. Okay, needle up. Okay. Right. So we fold it over, just like that. Oh, can't see. So my corner is matching up right there. And then fold it back this way. There we are. You can see, if you can you see? Oh no, you can't see. Okay, let me lift you up and over so you can see better. Sorry guys. There. So if I push that down, can you see? Not, still not quite. Well, what I want to show you is when I fold it over, if I'm not careful, I can get, yeah, you can see there. You can see how that fold is at a bit of an angle. It's not squared up. That's what I meant by, so what I'll do is took this fold up a little bit so that it is, there you go. So that fold, there, that's been taken up a little bit now. So this fold is straight. Yeah, so this fold is straight. You want an even gap from here to here of about 1/16 of an inch, where you can see the binding underneath. So where this raw edge is, you want about 1/16 of an inch between this raw edge and this fold, evenly all the way from there to the corner. Let me just turn that around. Back stitch. A bit more. Right. So that's me pretending that I've just sewn all my binding. Let me go back so I can see you. There you go. Oh, hi Carol. Good. Okay. So now I'm to the point where I've just got a gap and I've got my flappy bits of binding that I need to join. So I want to show how to do that. Okay, probably best if I re-maneuver you. Sorry, hope I was seasick about this tonight because okay. Kaylee, can you come and visit again so we can have a camera person instead of me trying to, yeah. Let me see, what can you see? What can you see? Okay. I think we're good. I think we're good. Okay. So right here. So this is where our join is. Right here we've got the gap. This is where our join is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this bottom one off straight across. Like that. Okay. And I've got my little piece that I've cut off. This is the bias binding. And then, so I'm going to fold that one over the top. I'm lining up the piece that I've just cut off. This is the width of it. I'm lining it up with this corner right here. This bit here is the binding that I just cut that's sitting underneath. This is my top piece. I want to cut this top piece right here straight across. It needs to be the same width as the strip. So basically you've got your top piece of binding, your bottom piece of binding overlapping the width of your bias binding strip. So this is 3 inches. Okay, so it overlaps. Then once you do that, you have to fold it at an angle, or pin them together at an angle. Remember, like we did when we sewed our strips to begin with, we're basically doing exactly the same thing. So this is where it can be a bit tricky. That's why it's probably good if you leave a bigger gap than what I've left, so you've got a little bit more room to maneuver. So I'm pinning. Hopefully you both can, oh, there we go, you can see that still. And I'm going to pin down here. That's my cushion. There we go. What I'm going to do is give myself a little bit more room. Just unpick this a little bit more, so it's easier to see. Trouble with leaving a much bigger gap is you run the risk of not getting the strips cut accurately and ending up with either the binding being a little bit too short or a little bit too long. That's why I don't try to leave too big of a gap. So that's my bias strips pinned, and we're going to do the same thing where we're going to make sure you can see that. So from this corner down to this corner. So I'm going to do that by eyeball this time around, but you can, I'm putting a pin here because what that will do, because I can't really see the corner underneath, I'll know that that bit right there is basically where I need to start sewing to that corner. You can mark it, so let me move you so you can see what I'm doing on the sewing machine. Oh, hi, Barbara. Oh, Jack's in the room. Oh. Oh. No, it's just me. It was just me being clumsy. Right, so. Oh, Jack. Sorry, I was thinking Link. Jack, yes. Jack. And then I have professional Jack as well. Yes. Because there's time where you need some seriously quality time with Jack. Okay. Can't see because my big hand's in the way. Okay, I'm just going to put this down and take my pin out. I'm actually going to have to take that pin out and just remember where it goes. There. So this bit's a little bit tricky. Kneel down because I have to make sure that all my binding is smooth underneath and there isn't a lot to work with. So yeah, my hand's still massively in the way. Sorry. Okay, I think I'm just going to have to go for it and I'll show you the end result. Pin out. There we go. Done. Okay, take pins out. That's right. Have Jack. Okay. So I'll move you back up so now I can see you all. Oh, hi Sarah. Oh, got rid of some of my good. Getting rid of some of your binding good. Send them to me. That's where they usually go. Oh, hi. Jack has family. Yeah. Right. So let me show you before I start cutting how this ends up looking. So to the side. So that's my join that I've just done. If I open it up, you can see how I have, yeah, that's my white bobbin. This was my top thread. I've just joined it at an angle, basically. So then you just cut it off. Yeah, just cut it off. Oh, yeah. So that's my join. You can see on the inside. Just cut it off, fold it in half, and then it sits perfectly because you measured it with your strip. It fits perfectly in that gap. So now you just got to top sew the gap. And then nobody will know where your binding started and ended. So I did end up getting a little bit of a rug in it right here, where it was a little tiny bit too long and I got a bit of a rug. That's what I find happens if you have the gap a little bit too long. So if you're doing it and you're finding, put you back guys so you can actually see me. So if you do it that method and you're finding that that happens quite a lot where you get a little bit of a ruck, what you can do is when you cut, I think I've thrown it on the floor now. Oh, this will work. When you cut your width, don't cut it quite exactly to that length. Cut it an 1/8 of an inch shorter than you would, just a tiny bit, just to suck it in a little bit, so you don't have to have that ruck. So that's that. Once it's all done, what I do, sew it on the front, fold it over the back, and then hand whip stitch that down. So what time is it? Yeah, I don't think I'll have time to do that. Maybe next week when we do the bias binding, I'll show you the bias binding, and then possibly I'll have time to show you. But who was it? Who was it? Is it Sally Ann or Sally Stevens? I can't remember. It might have been Sally Ann. Had a really good, Sally Ann Harrison had a really good tutorial on doing a ladder stitch to sew down your bias binding, or your binding, sorry, to join that down. What I tend to do is I just whip stitch it, but then my stitches are about 1/4 of an inch. Yeah, 1/4 of an inch apart. Yeah, maybe ever so slightly bigger. So maybe 3/8 of an inch apart. And what I do is I do a little tiny whip stitch, so directly up through the binding and down into the backing of the quilt, and then I move my needle along about 3/8 of an inch up through the backing, through the top of the binding, through the binding, and then do that way, and then I do it all down. Those clips, I'm sure you've seen those Wonder clips, are great for holding your binding down while you're sewing it. So there's that. Hi Christine. Right, so there's that way. And then if you don't want to hand stitch it down, what you can do, and I've started on this one, is machine stitch it down. Now for this, what I do is I attach the binding onto the back and then bring it to the front, because you've got more control with your machine to make it look good on the front, basically. So you can see it's not perfect. I've just done a straight stitch, but I have seen tutorials where they stitch the front of the binding down with a zigzag or a decorative stitch. You can do that too. So I'll show you. I've got another corner to do, and this corner. So I've already joined this one. So I can show you some more corners if you need. So let me try and move you so you can see. I need Tom, the cameraman. Right. Oh, yes, before I do that, sorry, and I knocked you. I was using white, so I need to change my bobbin. I only got a little bit left of the red. This one needle. Oh, it didn't work. There we go. Okay. I'm sure you can hear people messaging me. To mute that. Okay. So, yep. So it's 3. Can you see? Yeah, good. So this is a corner on the front. So basically what I'm going to do is fold that over. Oh, where's Jack? Jack is really handy for this. You can pin it, but I find these little tools are really helpful to hold. I'm going to do a little lock stitch because I started. Needle down, lift that up, smooth it out. Yeah, these little awls are really handy for holding fabric down right where you're stitching, so you don't have to get your fingers in there. There. Little lock stitch there. Perfect. Lift up and pivot. This is where the lock stitch, the needle down feature really is handy. If you don't have the needle down feature, just make sure that you turn your wheel so that your needle goes down into the fabric before you lift your presser foot up. I'm going to trim this corner. It's quite bulky. There we go. Yep. Okay, so I'm at my corner. Got my corner. Just going to smooth this thread off. Yeah. Try and keep my hand out of the way. I'm just folding that up. Keep that in there. There. Try and keep my hand out of the way so you can see. Oh, and then you sit over your awl and then your needle breaks. I mean, come on, it was bound to happen, right? It was all going too smoothly. So yeah, that's me done sewing for right now. But that's the corners, so that's how the corners end up when you do it in the front. Oh, hi Shelley. Computer lag. Oh, your son's doing video games. Yeah, him downstairs isn't allowed anymore. Okay, so that's how the corners look on the front. Oh, can you see? Yeah, you can see. There you go. Now, when you do it on the machine, there is one thing that I'm not entirely a big fan of, and it does take a lot of practice. So it is personal preference. But what you end up with is a line of stitching that you can see on the back because you've sewn through. So unless you get it absolutely, yeah, you can see that's where I stopped and started. Unless you get it perfect, and yeah, it's hard to do that. What I have done in the past is stitched it onto the back as normal, folded it over to the front, and then stitched the back in the ditch right along here, so that at least that's neat. And then because my binding, I always make my binding 3 inches, it overlaps where this stitch line is, but then it's a little, I always feel nervous not being able to see the front finished bit. So yeah, so personal preference, again, it depends on the project. I mean, this is just a cushion cover, so nobody's actually going to see the back, so I'm not entirely fussed so long as the front looks all right. And you know, if you're going to do a cushion, you know, if you change your cushions every season or so, yeah, it's not an heirloom. It doesn't have to be. If it is an heirloom and you really want to be belts and braces, then I recommend the, oh, where'd it go? Oh yeah, the sewing it onto the front first and then hand finishing the back, because you can't beat hand finishing. It just looks so nice and neat. But not everybody can do it. I mean, as in, not everybody, you know, hands work like they should, so not everybody can actually do that. So there's alternatives, which just takes practice. And I have to admit, I mean, I'm kind of out of practice because I used to machine bind all of the quilts on Sewing Quarter, so I'm a little bit rusty now, but I do like to hand finish my binding in front of the telly. So that's that. Let's see, was there anything else I was going to show you? Hi Sandra. Oh, always wondered how the machine binding worked. Reverse, yeah, reverse from hand binding, yeah. So that's that. So yeah, that's the binding for today. Next week, so then, oh, you're at an angle. Oh, I'm at an angle. I will cover, if you want me to, where have I put it? Oh, it's fallen on the floor. Of course it has. Bias binding. If you're interested, let me know and I'll set that up for next week. How to do bias binding. It's not nearly as tricky as it looks. Yeah. You only actually, I can't remember how much I've got here. I think it's like 1.25 meters, maybe not even 1.25 meters you need to make it. But yeah, so that's that. So hopefully you found that useful. Is there any more questions? Oh, no more questions. Yeah, be careful if you are using a jack. Don't sew over your awl, otherwise your needle will break. Thankfully it didn't do anything bad to my machine or to me, so there we are. And yeah, so have a good evening everybody. Hi Jackie. Good, now you know how to do your cushion cover. Good. Oh, and yeah, of course all your work is heirloom. Yes, I've seen it. Yes, it's definitely heirloom. Okay. Thanks guys. Bye Irene. Bye Carol. Oh, hand sewing in my happy place. Yes, hand piecing, definitely. One day I'll do a tutorial. Oh, hand piecing. Yes, if you're still here, I'll be doing hand sewing, hand piecing with John Scott. So you'll be able to see that on the 24th, a little bit of that on the 24th. So yeah. Oh, thanks Barbara. Okay, I'm going to go downstairs now and have my Sauvignon Blanc for tonight. And I will see you all next week. You take care. Bye.